This morning, we're concluding our series on parables. If you remember, we started this quite a few weeks ago, and the first parable we talked about was the parable of the sower. And the reason that I wanted that to begin the series on parables is because the parable of the sower, to me, is something that I personally am always looking at, because the parable of the sower, it's not so much about where the seed, how the seed was spread. It's about how the seed was received. That's right. And so one of the things that I tend to do in my life is I'm always looking at my heart. And I think I encouraged you guys during that sermon. I said, listen, look at your hearts. See how your ground is in your hearts. And sometimes the ground of my heart becomes a little bit hard, not a bitter hard, but it becomes hard because I think I know, that's not a good way to say it, because I become dogmatic in my beliefs. That's what I wanted to say. There's a hardness in my heart sometimes that looks like just being dogmatic. I know the answer. Wow. And if you hang around me, or I will tell you the answer to your problems. And here's the problem for me in that. I also live life, and I see that sometimes the things I want to believe are true don't seem to be. I don't know if anybody else experiences that. Just living honestly. It's funny. As Christians, sometimes we don't want to live a real honest life. We want to live a life that we hope is true. And if we actually acknowledge the reality of life, then that's a problem, because you're not supposed to do that, because then that reality will overtake you. You need to believe what's not true as if it were true. Does that sound familiar? For me, I have a hard time doing that, because I want to understand God. I want to know him. And I know that he loves me and that he's good. And yet there are times in my life where things are happening where it seems like it's anything but good. This last week, I've been praying for a family, a man named Mike. And Mike is... I've got to meet him just a couple times, and he's one of those guys. For me, there was like this instant connection. And I remember I saw him on 4th of July, and it was like, I want to get to know this guy. He was just this honest, just intelligent, likable, loving guy. And I remember sitting with him and just, as I often do with people I'm getting to know, I said, Mike, tell me your story. And so he began to tell me about how he came to know the Lord, that he wasn't even seeking for him. And it's funny, after he got done, he stopped and he said, I haven't thought about that for so many years. And I thought, I like his honesty. I like this guy. Well, Mike is in a difficult place. He's been sick for months, and they found out it was something to do with his heart. I could have Rick up here, and he'd give you all the medical stuff. What's the name of that sac? I call it a sac. Pericardial sac bag thing. It had begun to harden, which meant as it did, his heart would stop beating eventually. So they had to actually go in and take his heart and remove that sac and the things that had already hardened, and it was a very tedious, long time. And now he's in recovery, and it's hard. It's hard because you go, will he make it? Family is at that place, and so this morning my heart is there. My thoughts have been there, and And it's not one of those places where I can just stand here as your pastor and go, I just know what's going to happen. I don't. But all my life, he's been faithful. And all my life, he's been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I want to sing of the goodness of God. You see, no matter what we go through, no matter where we are, some of you are in really difficult places, okay? I don't know what y'all have gone through. Some of you are physically in hard places. Some of you emotionally. I don't know what you've gone through. But the truth is, all your life, he's been faithful. And the truth is, we serve a God who is so, so good. And you know what I love about God is it's not how well I'm doing that causes him to love me. Okay? It's not that I'm living up to a standard that he goes, okay, now I will love you. He is love.
Amen.
And sometimes it's hard to see it. So I wanted to look at a very short parable this morning and then a very short story that would kind of give an example of the parable. And I have like huge pages of notes like I always do. But I just want to speak from my heart, if that's okay, and not do so much reading from my notes. The parable is about faith. Faith, it's a word it's sometimes, I think it's really hard for us to understand. I think we all kind of say, okay, I think I understand what faith is, and I can put certain words in there that it's like, okay, that's what faith is. Like, faith is belief. Okay, yeah, I believe. I believe God. But it's got to be more than belief, because the Bible even says that the devil believes and trembles. It's got to be more than belief. So faith, for me, I think the word that best describes it is trust. Trust. Because sometimes things don't turn out the way I have faith that they will. And so I trust. Because really faith is, I'm putting my trust, Father, in you. That's what, for me, faith is. That I can trust him. Even when it's really, really hard. I've heard all kinds of talks on faith. Some have left me hopeful. Some have left me hopeless. Some have caused me to be much more grander vision of God, to have a view of God that's much bigger, and some have caused me to have a view of God that's very small. Some people tell me that faith comes from God, and then other people tell me that I'm responsible for my faith, that you're the one that has to work on having faith. I've heard it all. I've met people that talk like they completely have faith pegged and they have a handle on it. And I've met people that felt like they completely lack it in every area. When I think of faith, there's so many things I think of. But what it comes down to, and I've heard so many teachings on it, what it comes down to is, do I trust a God who loves me? See, he's faithful. He's loving. He does really, really, really love you. Do you trust him? In the difficult times, in the good times, do you trust him? So if you're in church this morning and you're struggling in some area, you're here on a really good day. Because I think God wants to do something. We're going to look at a parable that's found in Matthew chapter 13, verses Just two verses, 31 and 32. And this is a parable that's in the same, it's the third of three parables. The first was the parable of the sower. This is the third, it comes after it. And it says, he put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. They make their home in its branches. So, faith is like this grain that's planted in my heart, in the soil of my heart. It's the smallest seed there is. I'm sure there are other seeds by this time we've found that are smaller, but in that day, it was the smallest. See, I look at my faith sometimes and I go, I am not a walnut. Is a walnut a seed? Is it a seed? Walnuts? That's a seed, right? Yeah, it's a nut, but it's a seed, right? So I'm not a walnut. I'm like this speck. That's my faith sometimes. But if I take that speck and I plant it, I allow God to plant it in the good soil of my heart, it says that thing will grow so big that it grows like a tree. I'm rubbing on this, aren't I? Is that bothering you? Because it is me. Who says it's bothering you? Is that better? Did I take care of it? There.
Can you face it like more towards your nose rather than your... It's hitting your collar.
Oh, it hits my beard or my collar. How about it? Sorry, guys. I don't know. Will that work?
Yeah. That seems better.
Are we a little better? Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. It's the devil. He doesn't want me to talk about this stuff. Something huge is started from something so small.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible says don't despise small beginnings. Something huge can come out of something that is so small.
Yeah.
When I think of a mustard seed in a corporate sense, the church started with 12 men, 12 basic rejects that Jesus took. Not a whole lot special about them. And yet he called them, and from those 12, over thousands of years, there have been millions and millions of people whose lives have been changed by Jesus Christ. A small seed. In a corporate sense, we can see that small seed could be the disciples. We can also look at our little church. Do you know that if we as a church, as small as we are, began to plant our mustard seed of faith in this community, that it would grow, that our faith would grow, and that people would be able to find a place that they could call home, and they could rest in it. Oh, that our church would grow in faith so that when people come, they find this place that is just loving and caring that they can call home and call their church. Their church not meaning their religious place, but their church meaning their family. Because really, guys, that's where we are and that's who we are. And I'm going to rip this thing off. So faith, it's small. Faith is trusting God even when as small as a grain of mustard seed is. When it's that small, it will have an impact on your dreams. Trusting God no matter what your circumstances look like. Trusting God no matter what mistakes you've made. Trusting God though your past looks terrible. Trusting God though you still don't trust yourself.
That's a good word.
See, faith, if we take that small seed of trust, when we feel like I really don't have a handle on it, and I don't know what it's going to look like, and yet we allow God to plant that in us, it will change us. I'm going to tell you a really quick story out of the Bible, Mark 9, verses 14 through, I think it's 22, I think. Jesus has just been up on the Mount of, for those of you that go to church a lot, you remember the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on the mountain.
That's right.
God shows up in a cloud, right? All this stuff happens. And then Peter goes, hey, this is really cool. Let's just stay here. And Jesus says, nope, sorry, we're going down the mountain again. Okay, so I won't make a big deal of that because I could teach on that for a whole Sunday. But they come down the mountain, and as they come down the mountain, it says this, and when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and the scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, what are you arguing about? So you got these religious people arguing. Imagine that. What are you arguing about? Someone from the crowd answered him, teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth, and he becomes rigid. And so I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able to do it. And he answered them. He looks at his disciples, and he says to them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. So Jesus isn't really happy that he comes down from the mount, and now his disciples are in an argument with the scribes, and they're trying to cast out this demon, and the demon's not coming out, and Jesus is kind of like, guys, I've taught you this stuff. How long do I have to stay with you? Okay, one more time. Bring him to me. And so they bring the young man to him. And when the spirit saw Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And it has often cast him into a fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do something, would you have compassion on us and help us? But if you can do something, have compassion on us and help us. When I read that, do you see the father's heart here? Do you see the dad's heart for his son? He's kind of reached the end of everything he knows. His boy, for many years, has had this problem. And he's probably tried everything he knows. He brings him to the disciples, and they can't even do it. He's heard stories that they were, and then his son comes in. It isn't happening. Can you hear his desperation? Please, Jesus. If you can do anything for my son, would you please have compassion on us? Would you please help us? Do you ever find yourself there? David, would you please help me with this? Is this driving me crazy? I'm sorry. I don't know. You do the job, David. Please, have compassion. Is that it? Okay. All right. I'm always afraid I'm going to break the thing, so. Have you ever found yourself there? Honestly. A place where you've tried everything and nothing worked? This father has reached an end in himself. You know, that's kind of how I felt this week. Got a message from someone that said, I'm afraid. I thought, me too. Honestly. I know I'm not supposed to be. I'm a pastor, right? And I'm supposed to have it all together. And my faith is supposed to be bigger than everybody's, right? That if I just believe hard enough, then everything will be fine, right? And yet I can say sometimes, just in reality, I'm scared. I know what I want to see happen. And I know that God loves me, and he loves Mike, and he loves Nancy, and he loves the kids. People get into places of desperation, and you just want it all to be different. So this dad, he comes to Jesus and he says, if you can do something, I've tried everything. I don't know what else to do. If you can do something, would you please have compassion on us and help us? And then verse 23, Jesus says to him, if you can. Now, he wasn't angry at this point. He was just kind of making a statement. If you can. He says, all things are possible for one who believes. All things are possible for one who trusts. All things are possible. And I love this next verse, immediately. It didn't take a moment for dad to think about it. Immediately. This is the dad, and he wants so badly for his son to be okay. And so as soon as Jesus says that, it says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe. Would you help my unbelief? Do you see the desperation? This is at a place where it's like, I do believe, but I don't know if I believe. I'm hoping, but would you help me with those things so that I can believe, so that my son will be okay? I want you to notice that Jesus didn't say, well, when you get to the place where you believe enough, when you reach that threshold, well, then we'll talk again. You go away and get some more faith. He didn't say that. He said, I believe. Help my unbelief. What I like about this is the dad is just being gut honest. He's not trying to impress anybody. You know this term, fake it till you make it? I hate it. Yeah. He's not trying to fake it till he makes it. He's literally at wit's end and says, I don't know what else to do. And all I have, the only faith that I have, is this little mustard seed that looks like I'm bringing it to you, Jesus. My faith was just to come here and ask. My faith was, I got the son that's hurt, and he's in torment, and I don't got a lot. I don't know much about anything. But I heard maybe you could help. His faith was enough faith to get him to approach Jesus. That's all he had. Yeah. He comes out totally honest. I love this about him. I love it when I find honest people that are not trying to tell me what they should think or should believe and that I'm really doing, but they just say, right now I got nothing. I got nothing. Jesus, I believe, I'm believing the best I know how. If having my son healed requires more faith than I have, would you help me get more? As if it's possible, would you heal my son? And so Jesus, he saw the crowd come running, and he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out. And the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, he's dead. Jesus took him by the hand. He lifted him up, and he arose. Faith. Mustard seed faith. Guys, I don't know where you are and what you're going through. And sometimes we feel like, I don't want people to see what I'm going through. See, this dad wasn't embarrassed about anything. He was desperate. And I think sometimes in church in particular, we like to look like we got it together. Look like everything's okay. When it's really not. Some of you may be in a place of desperation today. So my encouragement this morning, as we sing here in just a minute, is that you'll bring your little bit of faith that you have, however small, that you will bring it and come honestly to Jesus. As I was praying about this, thinking about it, I don't know why this came to my head, but I'm guessing that maybe God had someone planted there, if it wasn't him. And it was this: dance like no one's looking. And I thought, what's that got to do with anything? See, when you dance like no one's looking, it doesn't matter. You just go. I was in Uganda dancing like no one's looking. But people were looking. Here's the deal. When you dance like no one's looking, it's like, I don't care what this looks like.
That's so good. Come on.
I really don't care what this looks like. I'm desperate.
Come on.
And so I'm not going to put any pretense on. I'm not going to fake it at all. If you come to Jesus in a desperate place, I will tell you he will hear you quicker than if you come to him going, yeah, I got this little problem. He'll go, okay. If you can take care of it yourself, go ahead. Desperate. Dance like no one's looking. Doesn't matter what you look like doing it. The only wrong way to come to Jesus is to come pretending. Let me say it again, guys. The only wrong way to come is to come pretending.
Wow.
See, he sees it all. And if you're asking him to do something, then he's asking you, then will you be honest with me? I'll do it. I love you. And so this dad brought his son, mustard seed faith. I'm scared. I'm trying to believe. Would you help me in my unbelief? And as you plant that seed in the ground of your heart, my prayer is this: that God will cause it to grow. And that it will become, that your faith will begin to grow in a way that you never ever dreamed. That you never ever dreamed. That you would be able to trust him with every single thing. And know this. Aaron, come on up. And team, if you're coming.
So good.
Know this. He loves you.
Yes, he does.
It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. He looks at you and he loves you.
Wow.
And he wants more than anything to be your dad. The dad you never had. The dad that knows exactly who you are, and you can be who you are in front of him without embarrassment. So, we're going to sing a song. And then I encourage you, if you need prayer, to come on up over here. We don't have a lot of time, but we do have a couple of minutes left.
So good.
Announcements, you'll do those after the song. Okay, so if you need prayer, if you're in a desperate place with God, even if you don't think it's that desperate, but you're going, boy, God, I really would like, and I want you to come and just allow God to love on you a little bit, okay? Would you do that? All right. Let's sing a song.